All right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show we have Boris Pelekh. Boris is a singer-songwriter guitarist who has had a very varied musical career, going from DIY punk rock roots to Broadway pit musician to Broadway musical director to being the guitarist of Gogol Bordello, all while fronting his own band Hey Guy, and now his new project Boris and The Joy. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. When Boris and I get into this conversation, there's much more to this crazy career that is explained. Boris and The Joy has a new record out now, As I See It Now. It's an EP, available on all streaming platforms. And Boris and The Joy are playing in Cleveland, Ohio at Negative Space on July 24th at 7 p.m. with Ziggy D of Sea Level, super special edition set. That's me, Guish, and Cowboy Princess Brigade. So that's at Negative Space. And you guys, if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me talk about Negative Space in great detail. If you're looking for an excuse and you're in Cleveland, Ohio, to check out the gallery, this is a good one. So that's July 24th. Negative Space, Cleveland, Ohio. Boris and The Joy, Cowboy Princess Brigade, Guish, and Ziggy D. That's me. Be there. It's going to be a good one. This was a really cool conversation. Boris is a really intense musician who has a really intense discipline and dedication to any project that he's doing. And during this conversation and coming out of this conversation with Boris, I left with a great admiration for his dedication to whatever role he's filling. But I think the ultimate view of what he would like to do is just this project that is going to be at Negative Space, Boris and The Joy, his own original songs. And we're going to listen to a track now. He's got an EP out now called As I See It Now. We're going to listen to the track Pokoi. So Pokoi, it's available on all streaming platforms. Boris and The Joy, the track's Pokoi. The track was Pokoi, artist Boris and The Joy. Negative Space, July 24th, if you're in Cleveland, Ohio. If not, there's plenty of other stops on his tour. Make sure you check it out if you go to borisandthejoy.com. As you guys know on this podcast, I'm a huge fan of Gogol Bordello, so it was really cool to talk to a guitar player who's played with Gogol Bordello and has dove into that ethos. And if you did Gogol Bordello and you want to dive even deeper, you can check out the interview I did with Eugene a few years ago. And if you're a fan of Gogol Bordello, you're going to love what Boris is doing. I highly recommend you come hang out with us July 24th in Cleveland at Negative Space. It's going to be a really good time. Also, if you enjoy what you hear, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Boris and sharing their insight with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Boris. I kind of when I was looking into you, I got the most recent stuff, but I really couldn't find too much on your background. So I kind of wanted to start there. When did you start playing guitar?
I am from Soviet Union. I was born in Moscow, and my immediate parents are not musicians, but my extended family were a bunch of violinists, classical violinists, a bunch of purists who hated rock and roll. And because of that, my parents kind of had the means to put me into music school. So I started at a really young age. I started playing classical guitar at about 7. And then we moved to the States when I was around 9, and I was still kind of doing it as a chore, although I really liked it. I wasn't that into it. It wasn't something I looked forward to a lot. And then around 12 years old, I discovered rock and roll and electric guitar and how easily it came to me because I already knew all these classical pieces. So my left hand was already kind of together. So all I needed to do is learn how to pick. So it was very simple, kind of a lot of, especially the basic stuff.
Yeah.
And then it became kind of like my life. And then I started being horrible in school, started failing out of everything because all I would do was play guitar and want to be in a rock band and do absolutely nothing else.
When the classical training goes awry.
Yeah. And then, so I got really into prog rock and started learning how to shred and play all this complicated stuff. And that led me to kind of the jazz world. So I went to Berkeley for 3 years and I studied jazz and jazz composition and all this stuff, and kind of got a hollow body guitar and started jazzing really hard. But then when I got out of school, in my early 20s, my first job out of school was was touring with a punk band, so I got a Strat again, and I started kind of rocking out again, and never looked back. Now I'm like, 20 years out of college, and still playing, I guess, mostly kind of like mixture of some kind of pop, rock, or I don't know, fun stuff.
Well, it's interesting, like, kind of coming from that, like, really technique-based and, like, well-thought-out background that classical music kind of provides, like, to find the freedom of rock and roll. Was that what was a like, that kind of got you into it? Was, like, knowing that you don't have to just practice all the time, that you can just play?
I fell back in. I used to love songs when I was young. My brother and I in the Soviet Union had all these like 80s hairband kind of cassette tapes that were like obviously illegal at the time, but we got our hands on them. And I think what drew me to music from a very young age is songs. Like those 80s hair metal bands wrote great songs. Of course, there was like shredding and all that other stuff, but like, and makeup and permed hair. But there were great songs always on all those like kind of like hair metal bands had great songwriting. They wrote really catchy, great songs. And then like when I ventured into jazz and classical and things like that, I kind of got really, really into technique and kind of like kind of sophisticated music and more like instrumental music and more like guitar playing and things of that nature. And I think after going through all that, what I realized like in my early 20s when I got out of school and I started touring with punk bands again is how much I love songs and how much I just really want to lean kind of my career at that point and still to this day on songwriting and like crafting great song. And yeah, and I've kind of stuck by that through different kind of genres for decades now.
Well, I definitely think you're honing that in for sure, especially with these last releases. But it is interesting, like when you're kind of in the tunnel vision of studying music, like how the technique, like it lures you to it. You're like, yeah, once I can get double thumbing down, or once I can run these like sharp 11 arpeggios, you know what I mean? Like I can really spit over this verse here. I got this, like, and totally, like it's such a minute part of the song, you know?
Totally. But I guess it makes you kind of like double brained. Right. Like I can still like jump into like, and I do occasionally actually love to do this, jump into like a very fusion-y situation where I have to like improvise and like play complicated stuff. And it's definitely just a different brain. It's like, I can do it. I'm rusty. Don't really do it enough these days to kind of, but I can still hang with like a fusion, like kind of like open jam situation where I have to like play all complicated and really pay attention to like the harmony going by and things like that. So it's kind of like a different brain. And I think that there is obviously some kind of overlap between that brain and the song brain. And it's interesting how it comes together. I think McCartney, who I consider one of the greatest songwriters ever, he definitely had a little bit of that like muso brain. He came up with some like complex stuff here and there and like bass and piano and stuff, and had some like really kind of harmonically and rhythmically daring sections and stuff like that. So I think he had a little bit of that brain as well. So I think it comes with some songwriters, and some not.
Yeah,
definitely Johnny Cash didn't care about that stuff.
yeah, for sure. Well, then that's interesting too, because like then the platform's very like basic, the chord progression, but then lyrically, like sometimes that's where you start to see that like the higher technique, you know, and just the songwriting and the craft like that and the metaphor and stuff, like all those techniques then come in, you know, and it's like a whole other set. And like, I don't know what it is about guitar players, being one myself, I find that like that bug of like that whoa, that's a whole like world I can jump into and just kind of fully becoming immersed. Like because I'm with the Cleveland State for jazz as well, like you know what I mean, so like getting that jazz bug, but then like also after waking up at 4 a.m. to practice all these standards and try to learn how to play over this stuff, and writing songs later and trying to learn how to do all the songwriting techniques, and like then being like, banjo's kind of cool too, man. You know what I mean?
Totally. So yeah, I'm exactly like you in that sense. So I've obviously led like talking about double brain, like I've always led kind of like a double brain lifestyle, because I've played original music all my life, starting from when I got out of school. I instantly joined a band where I was one of the writers and one of the arrangers, and it was a punk band called Days, and then we toured most of my 20s, kind of DIY, never made any money, and just toured, just wrote songs, wrote records, and toured. That's all we did. And we made zero money, and I was just always crashing on my parents' couch and like just living this like. And eventually, towards the later side of my 20s, I was just like, I need to start making money like some other way besides like delivering pizza and whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I have this craft. I can play guitar really well. It's not my passion anymore. My passion now is songs and original bands and like running around Europe and US playing these shows. But that's not making me money. And I'm not, the pizza delivery thing is starting to get old. So I started venturing into being kind of like a mercenary, and as my means of making a living. It never became like my main passion, but I always loved that part, that second brain of like learning instruments, learning jazz and harmony and shredding and all that fun stuff. And so that side of my life kind of took off really, really quickly. I started just jumping from one thing to another, and eventually I started getting like the hottest seats on Broadway shows, and I toured with a Broadway musical, and then I became a music director for these like kind of famous Nickoldoenon kids, and eventually all that led me to joining Gogol Bordello in my like early 30s. So I've built up like a very kind of like impressive portfolio of mercenary work.
Yeah.
Which it was not my passion when I got into it. It was literally like, I need money. I gotta stop delivering pizza. I gotta start doing something with this ability that I have, and not just torn punk bands and lose everything. Which I still kind of look back on that choice, and I'm like, did I hone in on my craft and like kind of like stay true to myself, or did I sell out? Like, I don't know. But I often think about that a lot. Yeah. And I guess we all think about the past and think about our artistic choices versus our like choices to make more of a living and actually have a home and actually pay rent and eat food.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think all of us artists look back and being like, was that the right choice? Was that the artistic choice, or was that the monetary choice? Like, which one was the correct one at the moment? And the answer is, we never know.
That's true. And it's one of those things you can get hung up on forever. And like, if it led to right now where you're writing your own songs and still touring your own music in different, from the US and the UK, I would probably argue that it was a successful move. But it's one of those things that anyone can spin their mind out, and recap all these things and be, well, maybe I've just kept doing that. But like, I think like to jump in, because it's weird. There's a whole academic world of music, and then the whole like doing it yourself world of music. And like,
totally,
I think the ultimate like is like a balance of both. Because like you hang out with the DIYers and play the basement shows, and they can't tell you the chords you're playing or why it works or where to go with it. But when you learn just a little bit of theory, you're like, oh, cool. I can really kind of, start to build what my brain's trying to express, So it's like in little like counterbalances like that. It's like the best of both worlds is what you want to aim for. And it sounds like jumping out of the van and finding your way onto like a Broadway show. Like that's a pretty good counterbalance of the two, man. What show was it?
It was a great. I did a bunch.
Yeah.
My most kind of my peak was literally my second show that I got hired for. I subbed on Spider-Man like during the 2 months when it was like the biggest show on the planet, and it was nerve-wracking. And I had to learn fast, and I had to learn instruments I've never played before, like baritone guitar, and like all like I never touched an EBow before, and like all these like Nashville tuning acoustics and like banjos, and it was all part of this one seat that I signed up for, and I said, yeah, I'll do it, before I actually looked at the score. And I'm not a great reader because I spent so many years in a van, you know, selling merch. I never became a good reader during Berkeley times. I always leaned on my ears. And then I never kind of got it together afterwards. So when I played on Broadway, most of my charts, most of my music would be like, remember this part? It sounds like this part.
That's
and like crossing out all like the 16th notes and be like, it's that run that starts like, that sounds like this, you know, don't space out, stay awake.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's okay. It's okay. It's refreshing because I'm the same way. I think it's a guitar thing, man.
Of course it's a guitar thing. Guitar's impossible to read on. Yeah. Nobody reads on guitar. Like,
I know.
I'm always really impressed when I see guitar players that can actually read. Like, that's so rare.
I know. Oh man. But like to do music,
we all
like
fake
that.
read. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all just scanning it.
Like when you look at a horn player or like or a string player, they actually read.
Yeah.
They read more than they hear.
Yeah.
I look at them, I'm just like, I don't know anything about this world.
Oh man, in like rhythms like that, like 16th note rhythm, like when you're looking at runs like that, it gets like such a spider clusterfuck of the brain where it's like, I don't like. You got
on guitar, like, how am I going to finger this? Which position am I going to do this in? Like, I mean, forget it. It's just like, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I actually read the best when I have a classical piece in front of me, because it reminds me of childhood, and like that to me is the easiest. And then as soon as I see like some kind of like single note runs and stuff like that, I'm just like, I'd rather listen and just to get it by ear.
Yeah, well, the one that makes sense because that's where you're coming from or where you started, you know. And it's like those runs like that. It's because they're scalular and like they're bouncing up and down. It's like the pattern, like when you could step back and really like look at it slow, makes sense. But in the moment when it's a 16th note run, you're like, oh shit. Like,
yeah. I just learned it by ear. But always faster.
That's super impressive to be able to like jump into something that get the gig and pull it off. You know what I mean? With something that heavy, man.
That was literally one of the hardest things I've ever done is that specifically that show at that time in my life. Also being very unexperienced at like mercenary work and just coming out of like the punk rock world where like you're wearing the same outfit for like 2 weeks and haven't showered and like you're like crashing on some person's floor. And then being like, yeah, you're subbing. And the guy I was subbing for was George Michael's guitar player, which is like the number one call in New York at the time. And I think he still is. He's now with Sting. So like still probably the number one call in New York. So I just got really lucky really fast because the first Broadway show I subbed on, I did really well. And the guy that I subbed for was super impressed. So then the call came in, like, do you know somebody that can sub for Spider-Man? And he was like, yeah, I just met this guy. He's never done a Broadway show before this, but he's killing it. So like, here you go. So I was like 27 years old or something, like subbing for this like 40-year-old, like seasoned dude who went on tour with George Michael. So it was a lot of pressure. It was insane. But yeah, it was a lot. But yeah, I survived. Still here. And I went on to kind of music direct American Idiot, the Green Day musical.
Oh yeah.
On the road, and that kind of like that spiraled kind of into me leaving the Broadway world because I realized it was fun, but it wasn't for me. And
what's directing look like when you music direct?
On a Broadway show?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it was between myself and the keyboard player. I was just holding rehearsals, telling people when they're singing the wrong parts.
Oh, okay.
But it's a lot of people like kind of that are really, really aspiring for like upping their careers. So it's very little of that. People usually know exactly what they're doing. Once in a while, you just like hold a rehearsal, you correct them, and you play. You go accompany rehearsals.
Okay. So,
things like that.
yeah, it's almost like just editing it. Okay.
And holding the band together, obviously. Coming from the punk rock world, obviously, I was in a really good position to music direct a punk rock band, like for the Green Day show.
Yeah.
Much more in position than like the keyboard player who I was sharing the job with, because he was like more coming from like, you know, the Broadway world. He didn't know anything about like picking techniques and how stuff should sit and sound, and how it should be big and fat, and you know, guitar doublings and things like that. So I was in a good spot for that. And yeah, it was great. It was great for me because it kind of during that era, I started to kind of meet the Green Day guys a little bit, and
cool.
yeah, it was great. And it was kind of, at that time, I was very, very kind of on my original side, on the second brain side of my kind of music trajectory. I was really in the rock space, and I had a band called Hey Guy at the time. It was kind of like a rock band, very sophisticated and complicated, kind of Radioheady, like weird rock, but like nevertheless, it was a rock band, and loud and distorted, and it was good for me to start making those connections. And I got actually more connected with them playing with Gogol Bordello, because we started opening for Green Day on some of the tours, like in kind of like late 2017, 18, and like that. And joining Gogol Bordello after the whole Broadway thing kind of dissolved was a very, very intricate decision, where I was trying to once again make the decision: am I selling out, or like by joining this like massive festival band, and am I letting go of my dreams of being an artist? And the way I sold it to myself, and the way I convinced myself to do it, is like, I will reap every single opportunity from this that I physically can. Like after every show, I'm going to go and meet everybody and shake everybody's hand and meet all the record executives and all the booking agents and all the bands we're playing with, and make friends with every, you know, famous rock band that we open for. And I did just that. I held true to my promise to myself. I networked like it was going out of style. I was just like at every festival, just like creeping in everybody's like in everybody's like dressing room and be like, "Hi, I'm Boris from Golgol Bordello. You should meet me. You should know me." And I was just meeting everybody that I possibly could, and going to every party, and like schmoozing and talking to all the execs and booking agents. And with that, I was hoping to pull my original stuff through the connections that I made through Golgol Bordello, to kind of pull up my original stuff, which was a good plan, and it kind of worked for the most part, and it's still working. I mean, I'm still very well connected in the music industry, and you know, I'm not with Golgol Bordello anymore. I left a year and a half ago, but I've built this like really healthy kind of foundation in the industry of connections and people that respect me and would help me and still help me and do things for me and with me. And so I'm very grateful and very fortunate to have had that experience. But now I'm moving on and kind of focusing more on what I originally kind of started this all for.
Right.
That's kind of like the original stuff, pursuit of the original music.
Well, I think that's an incredible like a strategy for that, because like, or even just like in any situation, just to network as much as you can, to meet all these people, because most of this whole like shooting into the void to book a gig or meet a person or get something done is spewing into the void, and the only thing that kind of makes that not as much of a just shot to the void is if someone knows the face and your name, like, oh yeah, I remember meeting Boris. Like, I think that was a very smart thing to do while like having this experience with Gogol Bordello and in the Broadway stuff, because that's like ultimately like that's what's going to make or break certain callbacks.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And making a living through playing original music is difficult no matter how many connections you have. Right. And it definitely that strategy was definitely a good one and a foolproof one, and it proved itself very successful. And it's still aiding me with so much stuff that I'm doing, because I am so well connected. But original music is hard. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, bands that are signed on massive deals are struggling. I mean, it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's always hard. It's just like running a small business. It's a lot of work with very, very little kind of repay. So you just got to love it so much that hopefully that love for it and the passion for it brings you enough joy where you can survive all the other chaos.
Right. Well, it's crazy because it's like one good gig of your, like, with your original stuff and the crowds singing along or just like vibing very, very aggressively to what you're doing, and like the room's packed and that energy, like one of those good nights gets you through like 4 bad years. I feel like.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What I mean? It's like
yeah. It's like some dopamine kick that kind of stays with you for a long time. It's a gift that keeps on giving, in the right sense of the word, not in the facetious definition of that sentence.
So like, I guess like kind of like to glean a little bit from these experiences to your own like musical like songwriting side of the brain, from like doing like musicals, what have you noticed that learning that in that skill set and that pressure and that type of performance, have you noticed something from that set of skills that has crossed over to the songwriting aspect?
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I think the songwriting stuff was definitely more influenced just by the things I was listening to and just artists that I was either surrounded by, like personally, or just artists that I was listening to records of and being inspired in that way. Broadway was never, well, I should say Broadway was never something I was inspired by artistically, but I didn't play on Broadway shows that were very classic Broadway show tune shows. So Spider-Man was all U2 music. And American Idiot was all Green Day music, which is music that I loved since I was a kid. I always liked the way that guy wrote. I found that his writing style almost reminded me of the Beatles in a way, with just a lot of distortion.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And I always loved the way that guy wrote melodies. And I can't say the American Idiot was my favorite of his kind of compositional works, but there were still lots of really incredible moments. And to answer your question, I guess, a little bit better, American Idiot was an album I wasn't super interested in when it came out. It just came out at the wrong time in my life. I wasn't looking to get into more Green Day. I was already like in love with those first few early records. So I didn't really pay attention to the record at all. Like I just heard the hits and I was like, no, that's cool. But that's not what I'm doing right now. I'm on some other, I was like into electronic music at the time. that came out. That was like 2004. I was like digging in all the Radiohead stuff and like trying to figure out how to do that stuff. And just not very interested in that album, but doing the musical and obviously being like a musical director and really forced me to like seep into a lot of that music. And like I said a second ago, like there's some incredible writing on that album that is like kind of deep in the album, not just like the big hits. Like there's some really cool songwriting there. And yeah, in that way, that was a thing. But I would say most of the influence came from either the writers that I was kind of surrounded by, or the people I was listening to.
So like, which I agree, like the American Idiot's one of those records that when it came out, I didn't really get into as deeper as I did later, when I'm like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. Before, to me, it was just kind of like everywhere. It was inescapable, and I was kind of like trying to, I guess, escape that. But so then I guess like then when it comes to like playing with Gogol Bordello, was Eugene one of those songwriters that you were kind of surrounded by that was kind of informing your own songwriting, or at least techniques that you found in your own songwriting?
Yes, very much so. So when I started working with Gogol, Eugene was going through like a really big, specifically songcraft stage, and him and I used to trade a lot of ideas and talk about songwriting a lot on the bus in between songs, because early Golgol Bordello obviously had some nice songs, but a lot of it was kind of like energy fueled. Mm-hmm. Whereas I met him a little bit later in his kind of staging, and he was in that time very, very into song. And the record that we did together, I produced the Golgol Bordello record from 2017 called Seekers and Finders, was a very, very song record. Yeah. And actually a lot of Golgol Bordello fans were really not into it and hated it because it really leaned away from the party and like the gypsy vibes, and just like this like crazy rambunctiousness that everybody was kind of expecting from Gogol Bordello. And that album really leaned on song. And I think it was both of us, him and I, like sitting in a room together for months, influencing each other and like, just listening to records that I was putting him onto and he was putting me onto. And like, I think it was a lot of back and forth. He also was a big influence to kind of bring me back to my roots. I didn't hang out with many Eastern European people upon moving to the States. I very quickly learned English and started hanging out with American kids. So kind of Eastern European roots were not part of my kind of music upbringing very much after I moved to the States. And he kind of brought me back, and like, he really, really was a huge influence in that way. He just played me so much stuff from the old block. He's Ukrainian, which I'm half Ukrainian. But he's also very like kind of well versed in the gypsy world and the gypsy jazz world, and just all sides of the Roma people music mixed with you name it. Like, he's a DJ also, so he's very, very in the know of like what's cool, what's interesting, and all these different sides of the Roma gypsy world. And obviously those are the roots kind of, and obviously the Eastern European just folklore and like that stuff for sure. He just like opened my eyes, like, holy shit, like this is this enormous wealth of unbelievable music that's part of my heritage that I've completely just ignored. Not disliked. I've always liked it. Just ignored it. Just didn't come into my preview.
Right. But that's so cool to have that.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's so cool to have it opened, right? And to be like, there's more. This well goes deeper here. I noticed with that record, because I really like that record. I really like that record and the one that came before it. I can't remember what record it was. It's got the hourglass with the bullet coming through it, and I noticed both those were really more songwriting, like song written, like based in songwriting compared to the ones that came before. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, this is amazing, because this is like seeing Eugene as the energy, but funneled in a different way. I'm like, I feel like I'm reading like some philosopher bits here, and like,
Yeah. Craftsmanship, poetry were like at the forefront when I joined the band, and that made me excited. And once again, those were not easy years for the band, because the fan base was just like, "Where's the gypsy shit? What happened to the gypsy shit? Why did the accordion player leave? Why is there more violin parts?" And the truth of the matter is because Eugene was just like listening to Johnny Cash and Elvis records all day long, and that's not where he was, and so was I. And I was like putting him onto like Jeff Buckley and stuff that he wasn't onto like before, and I was putting him onto all this like weird songwriter, like, Elliott Smith stuff, and he was putting me onto like Nick Cave stuff, and we were just like talking about songs all day long. We just didn't. That was the era,
That's so cool, man.
Yeah, it was fun. We both learned a lot. I think I learned more than he did, but
Well,
but I was way younger and way more of a sponge.
Was it, I guess, like, from this well of like new music from your heritage, did you find that type of song? Was there something within that music that affected your songwriting?
I think yes. I mean, I didn't just start writing gypsy songs,
Right.
but I think that's a really great question, by the way. All of these questions are really good.
Thanks, man.
I think that I think there's something about like the essence and the way this music resonates, the way these people express themselves. It doesn't have to be specifically using that harmony or that kind of melodic choice. It's just more like the vibe, the attitude of how, like, the expression of these people. And I learned a lot of that from Eugene as a performer as well. Like, there's something about the way Eastern Europeans kind of rip their guts out on stage and just like leave it all over the stage like that. And a lot of cultures do that in their own ways. But there's something very specific about like the Eastern Bloc and how it happens there, and how that was definitely a massive influence to my writing, and just kind of openness and choice of ways of saying something, or performing something, or writing something, or so. Yes. But not in like a mega direct way where I just started like putting a bunch of dominant, what are they called, secondary dominants in my music.
Yeah.
They were always there, but that came more from the jazz world, not from the Slavic world.
Right. Well, it's interesting where those two cross, right? Where jazz harmony kind of invades everything, or comes from everything, I should say.
Comes from everything and comes into everything. It's like both.
Yeah.
It's both. It's this thing that just invades everything, but it's also invaded by everything. Yeah. So for sure. Yeah, definitely 100% influenced hardcore by that. I started putting more like Russian subtext in my music, like, because I obviously speak Russian. I wrote a few songs in Russian, and used some words on this recent EP, used some words in the midst of songs from my heritage. I just became more immersed in my heritage than I ever was.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, it was a great thing that happened in that era.
I guess, like, from the other side of the brain, kind of looking at the more like kind of guitar playing technical aspect, for playing in a band like Gogol Bordello, there's like how you brought up, there's all these, or lack thereof, but all these like accordion and violin parts, and all this like traditional kind of gypsy like harmony, a lot of harmonic minor, and a lot of stuff based off that, coming into it on that aspect of it with that side of the brain. Was that a learning curve for you, or did that kind of like, was that natural?
Definitely learning curve.
Yeah.
It wasn't it wasn't uncovered ground for me. Like I understood harmonically where all that stuff sat. I've seen it before. I had played a little bit of like gypsy jazz, and I've known some like Django sounding guitar players and stuff like that. So I knew like the platform. But I was not prepared for, number one, the right hand work. My right hand went from like 0 to 600 when in my first 2 years in Gogol. I mean, I worked at it a lot, especially the rhythm stuff. Not so much like the lead playing, but the rhythm stuff is just like that super fast paced gallop stuff. Is just like, if you, when I was preparing for my first Gogol tour, I didn't injure myself, but my muscles just gave up on me. It was just like, dude, you've never done this at this tempo for this long. Like, it's not happening. Like, take a break. So I actually went to physical therapy.
Yeah.
Before my first Gogol tour, and I had to like do a lot of muscle strengthening because I was just learning that stuff way too fast for my body to catch up. And that was fun.
Shit, man.
That was a serious learning curve.
That sounds scary, man. Like,
yeah, right hand work and that kind of music is nuts. It's all so fast.
Because I guess one thing I've always wondered, like, you see Eugene do that weird, like, it's kind of like almost like a Raschiato, like kind of body tap thing with his strumming.
Yep. Yeah. He does that whole thing too. That was more the acoustic stuff. So I played all the electric stuff.
Right. But you're back there.
All that like really fast paced stuff. Yeah. And what was interesting, he actually recently just passed. The guitar player that played in Gogol right before me was the guitar player from the Wallflowers. Whoa. And he was this like LA guy and very, very diverse, can play jazz, can play country, can play all of it, but definitely not a gypsy guy at all. And when they hired him, he was just kind of like a temporary guy they hired, but he ended up staying in the band a few years. He was just basically like in his 50s and already had this massive career with Grammys and all this stuff. And he basically just told Eugene, he was like, look, like, I'll learn this music, I'll play it well, but I can't do that right hand stuff. Like, you just have to accept it. Like, I'm not your guy for that. And you could hear it on the one record that he's on. And Peruvian Conspiracy, that's the one that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You could hear that Mike was on that record, and he's like a LA studio guy, like, you know, great soloist, great like rock player, great country player, but not that guy. So he basically wasn't trying to like, he wasn't trying to overplay the situation. He was just like, I'm not doing this shit. Like, you just have to understand that this is the kind of player I am. And they were cool with it because they were seeing him as more of like a temporary guy, but he ended up staying in the band a few years. And, but when I entered the band, I got the vibe like that you're our new guy, like you're our permanent guy. And when I got that kind of thing, and also my kind of just veering always towards perfectionism, I was just like, I'm going to play this shit right. Like, I need to learn this style, like the way it's meant to be played. So I took it really seriously and really like ramped up all that stuff.
That's sick.
It was intense.
Yeah, man. Yeah. What was physical therapy like? Like, what were you just working on wrist exercises for? Like, I'm trying to like envision what that.
My right arm just gave up.
Like your whole arm, like shoulder down.
Yeah, it just started getting extremely fatigued after playing, and it just started hurting. And basically, what the physical therapist said to me was exactly what I kind of said, like, was already thinking. He was like, you're not injuring yourself, you're just working above your means. Like, you've never played this fast for this long, and your arm is not handling it, so you're kind of like tensing up, and it's just, you need to like strengthen some of these muscles. using weights and not guitar playing. So I just like went through this course of physical therapy, but at the end it was fine. Like, it all kind of leveled out. I mean, I had a very similar situation when it was during the time that I was in Gogol. I toured with Mark Martel. He's a guy that sounds the most like Freddie Mercury, and he sang all the parts in the Queen movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's basically like going to be the singer for Queen, but Queen didn't want somebody to sound exactly like Freddie because they thought that would be weird. So at the end they went with like Adam Lambert, but there's this guy called Mark who sounds exactly like Freddie, in some ways has more stamina because he's Christian and doesn't drink and doesn't smoke. So and doesn't have these like crazy orgies every night. So
no hang-ups.
So he's a serious badass. So I toured with him. I did a whole leg of tours with him in Europe, miraculously playing arenas with this guy because that's how big he is, like doing his Freddie Mercury stuff. And I went through a similar thing. Like I was playing with Gogol. I was playing my original stuff at the time, which was like kind of like I said, Hey Guy was like I don't know, like a Queens of the Stony, like a Radioheady kind of like weird rock band, which not a lot of solos, just like a lot of like good, cool rhythm parts and a lot of singing. I was the lead singer in that band. And then I was playing Gogol, and then here comes this thing is like, can you do like 3 months with us? And it's just like all this Brian May shredding. And I was just like, I can, but I haven't done it in a long time. And I also had to go through physical therapy this time for my left hand because I just overplayed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was learning those solos and just paying them so much homage and so much respect, trying to play them perfectly, but just my hands weren't in that shape. Like, I haven't played like shredding leads since I was, since I was maybe like on Spider-Man, which is many years before that. And like, yeah, once again, I went through my left hand, just gave up on me at some point, or like with all those bends, those like major third bends that Brian May does. It was just like, my hands just gave up, and they're just like, let's go again, back to physical therapy and re-strengthen now the left hand muscles. And like,
that's crazy.
Went through that whole thing again. Yeah. So like overplayed, overpracticed, tried to do it so perfectly, like sat there, like crafting all the tones for hours until they were like spot on the record. And like, like overdid it again.
Well, I admire that due diligence to the whatever part you say you're going to do. Like, it's inspiring how deep you dive into it. To the part where it requires physical therapy. That's impressive, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I mean, it's healthy and not healthy at the same time. It's a little bit of like too much OCD. But it is what it is. So
what happened with Hey Guy that led to Boris and The Joy? When was the crossover or the switch to the different style project?
It was COVID. Okay. Quite honestly, all that was all of it. We were touring like literally those years leading up to COVID. I was playing with Mark and Gogol and touring with Hey Guy. It was insane. I was never home. I was just on the road nonstop. And COVID came, and I was just kind of like, everybody responded to it differently. And my thing was just like, I reached out to the guys in the band, and I was just like, let's all just do a good due diligence of not like going out and hanging out with a lot of people, and let's just form like a COVID little like circle around the four of us, and let's just work. Let's like redo this whole band. Let's like write new shit that is going to blow people's minds and like get ready for when this is over. And that unfortunately was not the headspace that most of the guys in the band were in. A lot of people got really depressed and didn't want to meet, didn't want to work on music. People were hopeless. People didn't know when this was going to be over. I mean, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And to me, it was just like an opportunity. I was just like, oh my God, I don't have to tour to make money. well, I wasn't making any money. I was like trying to figure out how I was going to make it all work. But like, I was just like, I'm not on the road. All my tours got canned. Like I'm on to the next thing. Like I want to do like something crazy. I want to use this time to do something crazy. And, yeah, but the response I got from them was not that. And, you know, I was the leader of that band for 10 years, and I was pulling everybody along as it was already financially, and booking all the tours and like doing all the business and writing all the songs and producing everything and singing everything and playing a lot of the stuff. And like, so when that happened, I wasn't mad at anybody. I understood why people were in that place. COVID was a scary thing. And, but it kind of was like, well, I'm not stopping. Like, I'm gonna still continue to do this plan that I have, is to like redo my whole thing. I'm gonna do something new and crazy. And if it's not with those guys, then it's gonna be by myself, because what else can I do? I'm stuck in this house by myself. So the first thing that happened during COVID is I did this like big fundraiser. And at that point I was in Gogol many years, and like I was telling you, I was networking really, really hard and meeting everybody that I could. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to put together everybody, all the cool kind of musicians that I know. And I did this like project where we raised a bunch of money with like the singer from The Darkness and the guitar player from My Chemical Romance and like the drummer from Rival Sons and blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. Anyway, so I put this like kind of remote song together then to help raise money for COVID. And that went really well and got a lot of press, and like everybody was talking about it for a while. And I was like, okay, what's next? Like, that was great. I'm happy I raised all this money and helped people, but okay, like, what do I do now? Like, I was just like itching for a project.
Yeah.
And at the time I was just like, for some strange reason, or some very, I guess, universal reason, I was just listening to Bee Gees nonstop. I was just like, this is just the coolest shit ever. Like, it's fun, it grooves, you want to dance to it, and it has cool songs, and it has amazing harmony. I'm like, Bee Gees is the greatest thing that ever happened to this planet. Like, I've convinced myself. So I just started writing dance music, and like, I was just like, I'm gonna write a record that makes sense today, but like has everything that Bee Gees records have, like great songs, great harmony, fun for musicians, fun for people to dance to, has groove, like you know, just like Michael Jackson or anything, any great pop that kind of encircled all of those things together. So it's just like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. I'm just gonna become a pop guy. I'm just gonna start writing like electronic pop records with guitars and live drums, but like a lot of electronic elements. And yeah, and I started, and that's like, so I released a song during COVID called Vultures. And then I ended up in, it's completely unrelated to music, I ended up in Guatemala during COVID, and I wrote this kind of like acoustic record. And I was like, I'm just going to kind of put it all together. This is going to be kind of like the other side of the project. And at first it was just under my name, then it became Boris and The Joy. And I was just like, I'm going to just do my own thing and do these two things that I'm kind of set out to do. I'm just going to make this like fun pop music. And then I'm just also going to write these like really crafty acoustic songs and just kind of perform it all together and see what happens. And that became kind of Boris and The Joy. And I'm, this, the most kind of the bulk of the stuff is not out yet. I'm about to drop a record this year, and it's very slow coming because I'm a perfectionist and I work on everything for too long, but it's all coming. So there's much more kind of stuff coming than there is out there, and it's all coming this year. So
very cool. Very cool. Is
more of this pop stuff and more of this like kind of like singer-songwriter stuff, but like all kind of like blended into this big melting pot. So it's really fun.
I think I was going to say, because like going through, because the stuff that I can find of yours with Boris and The Joy, like Vultures is very much along that Bee Gees-esque inspired music. But this EP that's out now, I'm like, this is like just beautiful like songwriter stuff. So I was like, very like what I think it's the last tune. Last tune's got kind of that dancey element to it. I may be mixing it up, but after
no, yes, yeah,
okay. After talking with you, the song "Too Much," I think I can see where that may have been inspired from. But
Absolutely.
it's a beautiful record, man, and like what a cool, like, from all these different experiences to pull into like these two like unique styles that have a lot of the same like they have a lot of the same like songwriting tendencies, just with the different elements. Like a Bee Gees song is going to be like a Leonard Cohen song in a way, just you're going to get rid of more of that smaller metaphor, and maybe like smaller, like it's going to become a more tight metaphor that you hear multiple times as opposed to once. That's not like a elongated story, you know what I mean? Like it's really interesting that you landed on these two, but after how you chase the narrative of how you got to it, it makes sense. And I'm really excited to hear what comes next, man.
Thank you for saying that. You've obviously listened very closely, which I really appreciate. So the record makes more of kind of bridges more of the gap between those two worlds, whereas this is just like two extremes, because I was just kind of like jumping between extremes. But like the record that I'm about to put out, it's called Risk Everything. So it's literally it literally really gaps. It like kind of provides more of a thread between these two worlds. Although, interestingly enough, you have noticed kind of like a thread through already because of the songs. The songs is what kind of links it all together. But and the style of writing, I guess. But it's more. It kind of it's the bridge that's between those two worlds. It goes from these like massive, big electronic / live productions to these tiny, small, and like very fragile moments. And yeah, I can't wait to put this record out. It's been on my plate and it's very close to being finished. And I'm just like putting on the finishing touches on some of the songs, and it's taking too long. And I just need to, yeah. Just need to put it out.
I'm totally there with you. My band's been working on a thing, and I relate to that perfectionist bug. I am very much that myself, and like it's one of those things when you're putting, like, when you put risk it all on it, that's emotionally how it feels no matter what you're putting out. So I relate to that, man.
I'm so glad that you do, because it's such an intense emotion.
I guess one more thing, and maybe this is just kind of a forewarning question for myself for the Negative Space show. When you do this live, what's this looking like? Are you looping stuff? Are you building up? Like, do you got a drum machine that's coming with you for these other tunes?
It's crazy. So I don't loop. And I have nothing against loop artists, because I've seen ones that are extremely impressive, and maybe in some point in the future I will have some kinds of looping elements, but I really personally, as from the performance side, for myself, do not like to have things that are set in time and just repeating. It bothers me. Like, I like to shift tempos. I like to move the music emotionally, especially now playing by myself. I have so much room to do that. So what I do is I have this custom guitar that I've built. I play it. I play through a bass amp and a guitar amp, and I have the pickup set up in a way where I can do both at the same time. And I play a kick drum. Also along with those two, and I sing. And then for the acoustic songs, I just play acoustic, and just a crazy kind of combination of all this nonsense all together.
That's gonna be badass, man. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, it's more of like a guitar show than the way some of it's coming out on record.
Yeah.
Because I am a guitar player, and while I do play keys, like I find it hard to be alone on a stage with a synthesizer. I just don't find it a very appealing thing to look at.
Yeah.
Some people pull it off, but I just feel at home with a guitar, and for me, it makes for a better performance. So although these songs do require it, since I just kind of pull it all off on guitar, so it sounds slightly different, but it's still fun, and it kind of gets the song across. And it's really well-rounded show. A lot of arc.
Boris, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate getting the chat with you and your insight, and I'm really excited for the Negative Space Show on the 24th of July.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for taking the time and for helping me set up the show, and it's going to be a blast.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.